Namaskaram. So, in this discussion video, let's talk about a very important topic from the book Hidden Mysteries written by Osho. Topic is Hidden Mysteries of Eastern Temples. So, let's first start with a question. Beloved Osho, there was a time when temples, places of pilgrimage, the wearing of forehead marks, idol worship, the use of rosaries, incantations and spells, scriptures, rituals, and astrology, a belief in good and bad omens, all had a meaning. Now, however, they have become meaningless. Please explain them to us. We would also like to know if these were all only the outer tools of spiritual discipline, merely the outer arrangements to trigger a remembrance whose meaning has been totally lost with the passage of time, or had they some intrinsic value? Will there be a time when they will be used again? So let's discuss or answer this question, or you can say take a deep dive into the mystery of this question. Suppose we have a key in our hands. We cannot directly understand the purpose of it from the key itself, nor is it possible to imagine from the key itself that a great treasure is likely to be revealed with its help. There is no hidden indication in the key regarding the treasure. The key itself is closed. Even if we break it or cut it into pieces, we may find the metal of which it is made, but we cannot learn anything about the hidden treasure, which the key is capable of revealing. And whenever such a key, without any clues as to the treasure, is preserved for a long time, it only becomes a burden on our life. There are many such keys in life which even today can open the doors to treasure. But unfortunately, we neither know anything about these treasures nor about the locks which may be opened. And if we do not know about either the treasure or the locks, then what is left in our hands cannot even be called a key. It can only be a key if it opens a lock. This same key may have revealed treasures sometime in the past. But because today nothing can be unlocked, the key has become a burden, and yet somehow we still do not feel like throwing it away. The key has left a sort of lingering fragrance in the unconscious mind of a man. Maybe thousands of years ago, this key did open locks and treasures were found. The memory of that in the unconscious mind makes us carry the burden of the key to this day. However much we may be persuaded about the uselessness of the key, we cannot gather the courage to throw it away. In some unknown corner of the heart, the hope still lingers that someday some lock might be opened by it. Take, for example, temples. There is no race on earth which has not built something like a temple. It does not matter whether it is called a masjid or a church or a gurudwara. Today, it is possible for us to learn something from other races. But there was a time when we did not even know about the existence of other races. So there was no way to learn from them. The temples is not the fanciful result of the imagination of some eccentric people. Its roots lie somewhere deep in the inner consciousness of man. He may have lived far away in the forest, or on a mountain, or in a cave, or on the bank of a river. He may have lived anywhere for that matter. But wherever he was lived, man has built something resembling a temple. Something has come out of his consciousness. There is no blind imitation in it. they were not constructed by looking at other temples. So all temples have been of different shapes and types. But they have always existed. There is a lot of difference between a temple and a masjid. Their arrangements and design are quite different from each other, but there is no difference between men in their aspiration or inner urge. A man may be anywhere, okay? However unfamiliar and unacquainted he is with others, still he carries the same latent seed somewhere in his consciousness. Another thing worth noting is that though thousands of years have passed and now we have no clue about the locks or the hidden treasures, still we continue to carry these strange keys as if under the spell of some lingering memory. Despite all the attacks on it, reason tries to shatter it from all sides, and the so called modern intellectual does not accept it. The human heart still treasures this memory and continues to be fascinated by it. So we ought to remember that although he is not aware of it today, somewhere in man's unconscious is a resounding echo which tells him locks which used to open once existed. Why is this stored in the unconscious? It is because none of us are new to this world. All of us are born again and again, and there was never a time when we did not exist. What we knew consciously in days past has now, today, become unconscious, buried within us under thousands of layers as the unconscious. If in days past we once knew the significance and deeper secret of some temple and had experienced the opening of some inner door, then somewhere in the deep recess of the unconscious that memory still lies dormant. The intellect may totally deny its existence, but intellect cannot teach the depth where the memory is retained. So, despite all the obstacles, despite its apparent meaninglessness, it is something which persists, which cannot be removed, which may take new forms, but is continue. Still, this is very possible because we have known something an infinite number of times on our infinitely long journey of births and deaths, even though we may not remember it today. Apart from having an outward use as a means to an end, each of these things also has a deeper significance and purpose. The universal urge to build temples is only inherent in man. Animals make their dwellings and birds build nests, but they do not build temples. When distinguishing man for animals, one prominent feature is that man is a temple making animal. No other animal makes temples. To provide some shelter for oneself is absolutely natural. It is done by every creature. Birds and animals do it, even small insects do it. But to build a house for the divine is a distinctive feature of man. Without man having some deep awareness of the divine, a temple could not be built. Even if that awareness is later lost, the temple still remains. And it is quite certain it could not have been built without a deep experience of the divine. You make a guest house because guests go on visiting you. If there were no guests, you would not waste money on a guest house. And even though there may be no guest visiting now, the guest house remains. So the whole idea of building temples or shrines for the divine must have been conceived of in such moments when the divine was not just a matter of imagination for people but a living experience. The very phenomena of the in- incarnation of the divine on earth made it necessary to have special places in every nook and corner of the planet that could serve as a special dwellings for him to properly receive someone. Adequate arrangements have to be made. It can be understood this way: radio waves are passing all around us, but they cannot be picked up without a radio receiver. If tomorrow there was a third world war and all technology was destroyed, yet luckily somehow a radio receiver was left intact, you would not want to throw it away, even though you would know you could not broadcast or tune it to any program or even find a technician to repair it. You would not want to throw the radio away. After several generations of your family, if anyone was to ask the use of the radio, none of the family members alive would be able to reply. They might only say their fathers and their forefathers were insistent on its being preserved, so they continued to keep it. Their forefathers never told them what it was for. They don't know its use, and so it is of no help to them. Even if the radio were to be dismantled, nothing could be known about it. By opening the radio, one could not know that some time in the past, music and talking could be heard through it. This radio had once acted as a receiving station for something happening elsewhere. It could pick up the waves and act as a medium, presenting them as sounds to listeners. It, in exactly the same manner, temples once functioned as receptive instruments. Though godliness is everywhere and human beings are also present everywhere, only during specific circumstances within us do we become attuned to that godliness. So, temples serve as a centers of receptivity to enable us to feel the divine in existence, to feel godliness, and to become spiritually elevated. The whole arrangement in temples was motivated with this end in view. Different types of people thought up different arrangements, but that is not of much consequences. It makes no difference that various manufacturers produce radios incorporating their own specialities with different shapes and forms. The ultimate purpose is the same. The temples in India were mostly constructed in one of three or four patterns. Other temples became just copies of these. The domes of the temples were based on a model of the sky. There was an underlying purpose to this. If I sit under the open sky and repeat Om, my voice will be lost because the strength of an individual voice will be enveloped by the vastness of the sky. I will not be able to hear the reverberation and the echo of my chanting. All my prayers will get lost in the vastness of the sky. Domes were constructed so the resonance of our prayers can rebound on us. The dome is just a small semicircular prototype of the sky. It has the same shape as the sky, touching the earth on all four sides. Whatever prayers or chanting are done under its canopy do not get lost the way they would under the vast sky, because the dome throws them back towards the worshippers. The rounder the dome, the easier it is for the sound to travel back, and its echo increases in the same proportion. As time passed, it was discovered that stone too could multiply the resonance to a tremendous degree. There is a Buddhist prayer hall in the Ajanta caves where the stones echo sound with the same intensity as the Indian musical instrument called the tabla. If we strike the stones with the same force as is used in playing the tabla, they will give out the same volume of sound. If ordinary stone were used in the construction of domes, it cannot echo certain very subtle sounds. So this specific type of stones was used. But what is the purpose behind all this? The purpose is that when anyone chants Om and it is done very intentionally, the dome of the temple makes the sound reverberate, forming a circle of the echoing sound. The temple dome, by the nature of its design, helps in the formation of a circle by echoing the sound. Such a sound circle is a blissful experience. If Om is chanted under the wide open sky, no sound circle will be formed and you will never experience this bliss. When the formation of the circle happens, you are no longer just a humble worshipper before the divine. You become a recipient as well. In other words, the one whose prayer are being answered. And with that resonance, the divine experience begins to enter you. Although the sound produced in the chanting is human, when it is echoed, it resounds with a new force and is full of new energies. These dome shaped temples were used to create sound circles through the chanting of mantras. If one chants there, sitting all alone in perfect peace and silence, then as soon as the sound circle is formed, thoughts will stop. On the one hand, the circle is formed, and on the other, thoughts come to a stop. As I have often said, a circle of energy is formed even in the act of sexual intercourse between a man and a woman. And when the formation of such a circle takes place, that is the moment pointing toward super consciousness. Look at the statue of Buddha and Mahavira sitting in the posture of Padmasana and or Siddhasana. They indicate other methods for the formation of such circles. When we sit putting both our feet together and our hands on our legs, the whole body begins to act as a circle. Then the body electricity cannot escape and a circuit is created. As soon as the circuit is created, one becomes thoughtless. If we use the language of an electrical engineer, it could be said that the crowd of noisy thoughts within the mind exists because we have not created an inner electrical circuit. As soon as the circuit is created, the inner energy becomes balanced and silent. So, creating a circle of energy with the help of the temple dome was a great process, and this was its purpose and deep significance. At the entrance of temples, we find big bells or gongs, and they serve the same purpose. When you chant Om, although you may be doing so very quietly and your attention may be elsewhere, the sound of the bell will instantly bring your attention back to the circle of sound created by its vibration. It is just like when a stone is thrown into a pond, creating ripple upon ripple. In Tibetan temples, instead of a bell or gong, they kept a ball-shaped vessel made from various metal and a wooden stick to revolve inside it. The stick is rotated within the vessel 7 times and then it is struck once on the bowl with a loud bang. The vibrations created in the bowl produce a sound like Om Mani Padma Hum, the whole mantra. The bowl echoes the sound Om Mani Padma Hum not once but 7 times. Turn the stick inside the bowl rapidly 7 times, strike the ball, take the stick out, and you will hear the echo of the mantra Om Mani Padma Hum 7 times. Though the sound will gradually become softer and softer, it will be heard 7 times. Similarly, when you intone the mantra Om Mani Padma Hum in a domed temple, the temple will echo it. Every cell of your body will receive the vibration and return it with a deeper resonance. After a few moments, neither you nor the temple will be there. Only circles of energy will be left. It should be remembered that sound is a subtle form of electricity. Now, even science agrees with this. In fact, everything is a form of electricity. But the Indian sages go one step further and say electricity is a form of sound. That sound is the base, not electricity. That is why they call the Supreme Being, Sabda Brahman, God is sound. There is now a great similarity of approach between Eastern thinkers and modern scientists. The only difference being just which of the two is primary. The scientist says electricity is primary, whereas the sage says it is the density of sound which produces electricity. There is very possibility that in the near future science will have to look deeper into the nature of Sabda Brahman, sound, the ultimate reality. The sage's understanding stems from the experience of the sounds produced under the dome of a temple. When a meditator creates the intense sound of Om in a temple, within a short time he will feel that neither he nor the temple is there, only electricity remains. This conclusion has not been reached in any laboratory. The people who made such declarations had no laboratories. Their temples served as their only laboratory. There they experienced that even though they would start with sound, what remained in the end was electricity. Dome shaped temples were created in order to experience this transformation of sound. When Westerners saw Indian temples for the first time, they thought they were very unhygienic. By the very nature of their conception, these temples could not have many doors and windows. There could only be one door, and that too very small. The idea behind this was to ensure the circle of sound being created in the temple did not become depleted. It is no wonder then these Westerners went away with the impression that the temples were dingy, dark, and dirty, and fresh air could not enter. By comparison, their own churches were airy and clean, with many big doors and windows through which light and fresh air could easily enter, keeping them hygienic. I have told you earlier, when the secret of using a key is forgotten, all sorts of difficulties occur. Today, not one person in India would be able to say why temples were not provided with many windows and doors. So, when asked, we also feel inclined to agree our temples are unhygienic. No one now would be able to contend that the healthiest people have lived in these temples and no disease had ever been allowed to enter. Those who had prayed and worshipped there were some of the healthiest people ever in the true sense of the term. Why is that? Gradually, it was realized that the sound produced by the chanting of Om has a unique purifying effect. There are certain sounds which have a purifying effect, and there are others which contaminate. Some particular sound act as a deterrents to disease, and there are others who invite disease. The whole science of sound has, however, been lost. Those who have said sound is absolute being have said the ultimate that can be said about sound. There is no experience greater than that of absolute being, and they had not known anything deeper than sound through which to express themselves. All melodies and modes and their modifications are born in the East. They are extension of experiencing the absolute being in the form of sound. Musical compositions as well as the dance forms originated in temples and later on developed as specific arts elsewhere. It was only in the temple that a devotee experienced the efforts of sound in its innumerable variations, so many that it is difficult to keep count. Just 40 years ago, a hermit called Visuddhananda lived in Varanasi. He gave hundreds of demonstrations to prove it is possible to kill somebody using particular sounds. This man used to sit under the dome of a temple which could be said to be utterly unhygienic according to modern standards. And for the first time, in the presence of three doctors from England, an experiment was carried out. The doctors brought a sparrow into the temple with them. Visuddhananda made certain sounds. The sparrow fluttered about for a while and then fell down dead. The doctors examined it and pronounced it dead. Then Visuddhananda made some other sound. The sparrow came back to life and began fluttering about again. It was then realized for the first time that the impact of certain sound can produce specific effects. Now we readily accept that certain effects are produced by certain sounds because it has been demonstrated scientifically. We now agree that if a particular light ray falls on your body, it will have a particular effect. If a specific medicine is administered to a patient, it will produce a specific effect. If particular colors are used, they bring about particular effects. Why then shouldn't particular sounds cause certain effects? Now, there are several laboratories in the West which are actively engaged in the investigation of the relationship between sound and life. And two or three laboratories have arrived at conclusions of deep significance. In two such laboratories, scientists have proved that particular sound can produce more milk in lactating mothers. Through certain sounds, plants can be made to blossom within 2 months instead of the usual 6 months. And cows yield more milk if soft music is played at the time of milking. Dairies in Russia today employ this latest method at the time of milking. And the day is not far off when fruit and vegetables will be grown with the help of a special sounds. Laboratory demonstrations have already been made. Now it is the only a matter of time until it is done on a broader scale. If fruit, vegetables, and milk are influenced by sound, shouldn't we be influenced by sound? Disease and health are determined by particular sound waves. So, in the past, people made hygienic arrangements in their temples which did not depend only on air and atmosphere. They did not believe that only an abundant air supply leads to good health. Otherwise, it is inconceivable that over a period of 5,000 years, they would not have hit upon the idea of properly ventilating their places of worship. The Indian hermit usually sits in caves where no light or air enters, or else he sits in temples with doors so small that one has to bend low to enter. There are some temples where you have to lie down and crawl in to enter. In spite of this, there were no ill effects on their health. In India, this has been our experience over thousands of years. But when, for the first time, we began to doubt this, we also made our temple's door bigger and installed windows. We modernized the temples, but in doing so, converted them into ordinary buildings. Their very purpose as keys to something more was lost. The acoustics and the architecture of a temple have a deep connection. In fact, the whole thing is a science of sound. There is a specific stipulation as to the angle at which a sound is to be made. There are stipulations for making a sound while standing and while sitting. It is even stipulated when sounds can be made only while lying down, because the impact of the sound will have a certain effect when made standing and will change again when made while sitting down. It is also clarified which sounds should be made together and which are to be made separately for different results. So it is interesting to note the confusion that was created when Vedic literature was translated into Western languages. Western languages emphasize the linguistic rather than the phonetic, whereas the Vedic view gives more importance not so much to the meaning of the written or spoken word as to the special sound it should produce and the composition of that sound. Hence, the Sanskrit language is phonetic, not linguistic. The emphasis is more on the sound than on the word. And so, for thousands of years, it was felt that these valuable scriptures should not be written down because it was natural that when they were written down, the emphasis on sound would be lost. The insistence was that the knowledge was passed on by the word of mouth rather than in writing, because in writing words down they would become mere words and the subtle nuances associated with the sound would be lost and so become meaningless. If we write down the name Rama, those who are reading it will say the word in many different ways. Someone will put more emphasis on R and someone else more emphasis on A, and still somebody else will put more emphasis on M. It would depend on the individual reader. So, as soon as a word is written down, the effect of the sound is destroyed. Now, to understand the effect of the sound of those words, a whole decoding exercise to pronounce the words correctly will have to be done. So, for thousands of years, there was a strong insistence on not writing the scriptures because the ancient seers do not want the phonetic arrangements to be lost. The scriptures had to be passed on to the others directly by word of mouth. So, scriptures were known as shrutis, meaning that which is learned by listening. What was passed down in the form of written books was never accepted as scripture. It was all scientifically based on the arrangements of sound. At some places, the sound had to be soft, and at others, it had to be loud. It was very difficult to write these words in script form. The day the scriptures were reduced to writing, the essential, inherent, original, and inner arrangement of the sound was lost. It was no longer necessary to understand only through listening. You can read a scripture, it is available in the market. Now there is no relationship or relevance to sound. It is important to note that the emphasis of the scripture was never on the meaning. The emphasis on meaning became relevant later when we reduced those scriptures on writing. If something written down has no meaning, it would look insane. So, meaning has necessarily to be given to the written word. There are still some parts of Vedic lore where no meaning could be deciphered. And these are the real parts because they are totally phonetic. They do not convey any meaning. For example, no question about the meaning of the Tibetan mantras Om Mani Padma Hum arises because its significance is totally phonetic. Similarly, there is no question of any meaning in the mantra Om, but it has a sound based impact which creates a special effect. When a meditator repeats Om Mani Padma Hum again and again, the sound affects the various chakras and they are activated. It is not a question of meaning, the significance concerns the sound themselves. So, the fact that the old scriptures did not lay any stress on the meaning but only on their utility, on what they could be used for, and their benefits, deserves our special attention. Buddha was once asked, "What is truth?" He replied, "Truth is that which can be used." The definition of truth is that which can be used. Science will define truth in the same way. Its definition will be pragmatic. Truth is that which can be made use of and which can be shown. If it is said that water is created when hydrogen and oxygen are mixed, we do not care whether the statement is true or not. If we can see that water is made by mixing hydrogen and oxygen, it is true, otherwise, not. The statement in itself has no validity, its validity is in its utility. If it is possible to create water in this way, it has to be proved by actual demonstration. Now, science has adopted this definition of truth, which religion accepted 5,000 years ago. In religion, utility was the test to verify a truth. The mantra Om has no meaning, but it has a utility. A temple has no meaning, but it has a utility. To make use of it is an art, and there is an inherent flow in all art which cannot be taught but must be absorbed. I have heard there was an emperor in China 1500 years ago who was very fond of meat, so much so that he would have a cow or bull slaughtered right before his eyes. The same butcher slaughtered cattle in front of him every morning for 15 years. One day, the emperor asked, "I haven't seen you sharpening your axe once in 15 years. Does its edge become blunt? Doesn't its edge become blunt?" The butcher replied, "No, your majesty, it doesn't." The edge only becomes blunt when the butcher is not an expert. If he doesn't know where to strike, the butcher must know where there are bones and joints, and then the axe can cut the animals in two with one blow. The art of cutting is passed on from one generation to the next. So, not only does the edge not become blunt, but it becomes sharper daily with every fresh stroke. The emperor asked the butcher to teach him the art. The butcher replied, it would be very difficult. I have not learned this art, but imbibed it by watching my father since early childhood. It was not taught to me. I absorbed the art through watching my father every day. Sometimes I would fetch the axe for him, and sometimes I would stack up the limbs of the animals. That was how I learned the art. If you are ready to do the same, standing beside me, sometimes handing over the axe to me and then putting it back, sometimes simply sitting and watching, then perhaps you will learn the art. But I cannot teach it to you. Science can be taught, but art has to be imbibed. All these mantras have no meaning, but they have pragmatic value. And we used to make our children absorb them at a very early age. They would learn the use of the temple without ever even being aware of what they had learned. They would learn the art of entering a temple, how to sit there, and how to make use of the sacred precincts. Wherever there was an emergency or any difficulties, people would run to temple and then return home having regained a sense of balance and tranquility. Each morning they would go to the temple because it was not possible to find what they got there anywhere else. But all of this was not taught to them. They incorporated it at a very early stage in childhood. It was not taught to them but imbibed by them. Wherever there is art, it cannot be taught. The effects of sound in the temple and the temple itself were an arrangement for experimentation. As long as the effect of the sound of a word was not understood, the whole experiment was meaningless. For example, it was a convention that a mantra should only be given to a disciple by a master. The emphasis was on the mantra being recited by the master in the disciple's ear. You might have known the mantra for a long time, but still the master would whisper it in your ear. You might wonder what is new in this. Couldn't I have done it without the master? Everybody knows how to repeat a mantra, and still this master has whispered it to me as if it were a great secret. But what is to be understood is that when the master says it in the disciple's ear, he does it in a particular way so as to emphasize certain sounds, something which is not known to all. As a master of fact, there are various phonetic variations of Rama that have different effects. The story of sage Valmiki is well known, but it has now lost its true significance, and so seems rather childish. It is said that Valmiki was illiterate and a mere rustic. His master told him to repeat the mantra Rama Rama, but after some time he forgot and started chanting it in reverse Mara Mara, and he became enlightened. When the real keys with which to unravel such mysteries are lost, all sorts of trouble arises. The fact is that while chanting the mantra Rama Rama after a period of time, you automatically begin to chant Mara Mara, so creating a circuit. When Rama Rama is chanted quickly, the chanting turns into Mara Mara. Then it has the right phonetic emphasis. Then something unique happens. You cease to be, you are no more, and in that very moment, When you cease to be or you die to your identity, the mantra becomes complete. That is the moment of real experience. When you have ceased, your ego has died. It is interesting to note that if this process is completed properly, you will begin with the repetition of Rama Rama, and very soon a moment will arise when you will be repeating Mara Mara instead. Even if you want to say Rama, you will not be able to. Your whole being will be repeating Mara Mara. At that moment, you will die to yourself. And that is the first step of meditation. When your dying to yourself is total, you would suddenly find that Mara Mara is beginning to revert back to Rama Rama. And when Rama Rama begins from within you, without you doing it, you will actually experience Rama, the ultimate reality. But not before that. In between, the transformation to Mara is essential. So there are three parts to the mantras. Begin with Rama, lose your identity in Mara, and then the mantra will evolve into Rama. The second step of Mara is a necessary step. Necessary part of the process. Unless that happens in the middle, the real ultimate Rama experience in the third step will not happen. If you know the true phonetic and if you chant it properly, if you put the stress on Ra and less on Ma, only then will Rama change into Mara. When Ma has less emphasis, it becomes like a valley and a Ra becomes the peak, the highest peak. In your repeating the Ma of Rama with less emphasis, the transformation happens, and very soon you will find that Ma becomes the peak and Ra becomes the valley. That means it's interchangeably change. Then you are repeating Mara Mara, death death without your knowing it. Like waves in the ocean, after every peak there is a valley. Like waves in the ocean, sound also has a waves, like a crescendo and diminuendo in music. Unless you are aware of the proper phonetic pronunciation, you can go on repeating a mantra, but it will produce no results. Whoever wrote this story that Valmiki repeated Mara Mara because he was illiterate and an ignorant rustic is far from the truth. Valmiki was illiterate and a rustic, but in this particular instance, he was an adept. He knew the science of how to chant Rama in order to transform the sound into Mara. Only after this intervening transformation is Rama born. And this Rama will not be the one spoken by you because during the second step of Mara, you cease to be. Then who will be repeating it? The real Rama that is born within you at the end of the second step will not be spoken by you but will be just a happening. In spite of you, it will happen automatically. It will not be your repetition. The value of the Shrutis, the scriptures that are heard or listened to, is the phonetic emphasis. Only a person who knows the science of phonetics can pass the knowledge of Shruti. Only then they will be useful. Otherwise, the words will be the same as those written in the book. Anybody can read them, but the science will remain unknown. The science of sound, its accents and descents, and the lengths of soundless intervals constitute the whole mystery. There used to be a complete scripture of mantras, and temples served as the laboratories where they were being tested. For the seeker, this was their inner value and meaning. The number of people experiencing self realization within the precincts of a temple has always been greater than of those who have experienced it outside the temple. This has happened in spite of the fact that the divine is as much present outside the temple as inside. Today, this experience is not happening even inside the temple. People like Mahavira, who had to experiment without the use of temple, had to find different methods, more painstaking than the ones used inside the temples. Mahavira had to spend years mastering many different types of postures so that he could create the circuit of energy within. He did not want to use the help of the temple, but the alternative was a lengthy process of difficult practices which took years and which could only be accomplished by a man with the iron will of Mahavira. Buddha also attained enlightenment without the help of the temple, but soon after the deaths of both Mahavira and Buddha, temples had to be constructed because what a temple could offer the ordinary man was not given by either Buddha or Mahavira. The practice which Buddha and Mahavira advocated was not always possible for the ordinary man to achieve. Today, if we can fully understand the science of sound circuits, we can invent even better instruments than these temples. Research in this direction is at present already going on, and it will be possible to invent better instruments because now we know a lot about electricity. But such experiments can be dangerous too. Still, if scientific arrangements are properly set up, whatever help a temple once gave will be available through scientific technology because the circuit of energy that was once created in the temple could be created by some other method. Then you could keep a small instrument in your pocket to achieve the electrical circuit within you. And on that electronic instrument, you might even be able to store sounds recorded to create circuits within you. Research is presently being done in this area in America. 7 or 8 scientists in America are now engaged in a fascinating study aimed at showing that all our experiences of pleasure and pain are nothing but electrical currents passing through certain centers of the body. For example, if your body is pricked all over with a needle, at some of those points you will not experience pain. There are a few dead spots in your body where you will not feel anything. If someone pricks your back in a dozen or so places, 3 or 4 of those places will have no sensation. In exactly the same way, there will be some 5 or 10 points of great sensitivity, where even the slightest pricking will cause a lot of pain. Our heads has many sensitive spots. There are millions of cells in the brain and each one has a particular sensitivity. When you say you feel happy, electricity is flowing through one particular center, giving you a sense of happiness. Suppose you are sitting next to your beloved, holding her hand, and you say you are feeling happy. What is happening? If a scientist described this phenomena, he would say that electricity is flowing through a particular center in your brain, and that is only your past mental association with this person that makes you so happy in her presence. But you may no longer feel that happiness after 2 or 3 months because if you use a certain center very often, letting electricity flow through it frequently, that center becomes insensitive. For example, if you repeatedly prick your foot at a particular point with a needle, the pain will become less and less. Tomorrow, the pain will be less than today, and the day after, that it will be even less. If you go on doing it, this point will develop a callus which will become insensitive and will not feel any pain at all. People who play the sitar develop insensitive surface skin on their fingers, and then any amount of plucking on the instrument strings does not make any difference. Their fingers do not feel any pain. So, if after 3 or 4 months you feel that your love has died or become less, it does not mean that your love was fragile. It only means that the point within you from where the feeling of happiness was coming has become desensitized because of frequent use. If your beloved goes away for 3 or 4 months, when she returns, she can make you feel happy again. Scientists' experiments on rats have been very revealing. The brain of a rat was opened up, and a window kept open through which to observe what happens when a rat is having sexual intercourse. The particular point through which the electric current was passing when the rat ejaculated was noted. After that, this point was connected to an electrode and the window was closed. The other end of the electrode was connected to a machine which could release a controlled amount of electricity. There was a switch which could be operated by pressing it, which would release electricity, the same intensity of electricity that was flowing at the time of the rat's ejaculation. The rat was taught how to operate the switch, and whenever it pressed it, the required amount of electricity was released by the machine, and that activated the point in the brain connected at the other end of the wire, giving the rat the same pleasure as in sexual intercourse. The rat felt very happy when it pressed the switch. It was also happy that it began to press the switch again and again. You will be surprised to know that the rat did not do anything else after that for the next 24 hours. It simply went on pushing the button 6,000 times within an hour. It did not bother to eat, drink, or sleep, but just kept pressing the switch until finally it collapsed exhausted. The scientist who was doing the experiment said that the rat enjoyed the pleasure of sex so much more than it had ever done through intercourse, although it was not actually having intercourse but only experiencing sexual pleasure because of the electrical current releasing in its brain. The scientist claimed that very soon that same sensation would lose its charm for the rat and become very ordinary. The day we are able to connect the human brain to an electrode to receive the right electrical current at the right point, we will not be able to find anyone who will actually want to take part in sex because there is practically no gain and a lot of energy is lost. Instead, one can carry a small battery operated device in one's pocket, and whenever one wants to, one can activate the sex center and experience the same joy as in sexual intercourse. But this has its own dangers. Once it is possible to locate the various centers in the brain, such as for doubt or for anger, these centers can be surgically removed. The centers connected with rebelliousness can be disconnected and man will become very docile. However, governments can misuse such scientific achievements. Scientists are not aware of it, yet it may be that with the help of scientific instruments, we can provide a milieu like that which exists in a temple. The experiences which took hours, months, and years to obtain with sound effect in a temple may be more easily created with scientific instruments. So, what I am saying is the temple was based on very scientific foundations. Through the medium of sound, feelings of happiness, peace, love, and bliss were aroused. And in the presence of these feelings, one's whole attitude towards life could be transformed. On the other hand, what science can do may be fraught with great dangers. The main danger lies in the fact that whatever science does becomes technological and consciousness does not play a part in it. It may be possible to bring about the same state as it is possible through being in a temple by means of electrical instruments, but then a real transformation of consciousness will not be possible. The heights of consciousness and transformation cannot happen that way. What a man can get by pressing a switch will not bring about any fundamental transformation. So I do not see any possibility of such instruments fulfilling the need for the temples. You may wonder if temples can be used today in these changed times. Yes, it is possible, but the conventional orthodox priests who is in the temple today will not be able to explain what was happening and how it was happening in the temples in ancient times. He still has the key, but he does not have any idea of the hidden mysteries behind it. The whole philosophy and science of the temples can still be of use today. and we can create better temples now because we have better building materials. We can set up a whole sound system in such a way that sound can be magnified 1,000-fold. Walls can be made that so sensitive that if you chant the mantra Om once, the wall will echo it thousands of times. Today we have better instrument, but we should know the key which can unlock the secrets of our being. In the old days, there had to be at least one door in a temple, but now we can build a temple without any doors. In the old days, the people who built the temples were generally living in houses like huts made of cow dung and clay. They did the best they could within their limitations, and what they did was great. Today, we have wonderful technological skills, but we are not able to benefit from them. So, for as we have been discussing the benefit of temples for those who entered them, but temples have their external significance and utility as well. We have discussed how meditators enter a temple and go deep into meditation and prayer. But even a person just passing near a temple was benefited, although now that does not happen anymore. Today, even those who go inside come out with nothing. But in those days, the temple could even help a person who had just been near it because the people who were inside the temple were really doing something. Hundreds of meditators in the temple were activating special sound vibrations by which the whole atmosphere of the temple became charged. The temple was not just vibrating within, it was also vibrating outside and spreading subtle waves outside as well. The whole environment became alive because the temple itself was alive. This was the significance of a living temple. A living statue signified the same thing. They affected even those who had not come there for any particular benefit. A temple could only be called a living temple if someone could pass by it casually and suddenly sense that the air had changed, the atmosphere transformed, even though he may not have known that there was a temple in the vicinity. Suppose you are walking along a road on a dark night. You are passing by a temple when suddenly you experience some change within. You are thinking of doing something wrong and suddenly your thoughts change. You are thinking of killing someone and suddenly you feel full of compassion. But all this can only happen if the temple is charged, where every brick and stone of the temple, the doors and gates are all charged. Then the whole temple will have become a temple of living vibrations. A unique method is used to charge the bell that hangs in front of the temples. Whoever enters ring the bells does it with total consciousness, not with a sleepy mind. When you ring the bell of a temple, not half asleep but with alertness, that creates a discontinuity in your thoughts, a sort of break in the chain of your thoughts, and you become aware of a changed atmosphere. There is a similarity between the sound of the bell and the sound of Om. In fact, there is some inner relationship. The sound of the bell continues charging the temple all the day long, and the sound of Om also charges the temple with its vibrations. Many other things like that were made use of in the temple. They had their inner connections. It might be an earthen lamp filled with ghee, the burning of incense, the use of sandalwood, paste, or flowers, or any other fragrance. All were related. It was not a question of a particular deity liking a specific flower. It was a question of the harmony of the temple. What type of sound and what type of fragrance was harmonious with the temple was decided through experience. Only a certain flower with a certain fragrance which blended harmoniously with a certain sound was used. Others with different fragrance were prohibited. In a mosque also lobhan, a kind of fragment resin could be used as incense, and in the temples only dhoop and agarbatti fragrance. All these had their connections with sound. With the sound of Allah, there is an inner harmony with the fragrance of Lovam. These links or connections were all discovered through the inner search for the ultimate. They were not found through any thinking processes. I will tell you how this was done. You may sit in a room where no lovan has been burned and repeat Allah, not just Allah but Allahu, with a special emphasis on who. You will find that slowly this Allah sound disappears and automatically only who will go on being repeated. When this happens, you will suddenly find that your whole room is fragrant with the smell of lobham. It was discovered that lobham is similar to a substance that emanates from you. So, lobham is burned in mosques with a view to helping people repeat the mantra Hu. Then the process is twofold. The emanation of the fragrance from within a person may take some time, but the same fragrance can initially be provided outwardly in the mosque. However, the repetition of Om can never bring about the fragrance of Lobham. This sound strikes another center which cannot produce that fragrance. There are separate areas of fragrance within our body, and these are linked with other thoughts and feelings. That is why Jainas believe that Mahavira's body never gave out any bad odor. This body had a certain fragrance on the basis of which it was possible to recognize a Tirthankara, a Jain enlightened master. In Mahavira's time, 8 other people claimed to be Tirthankaras, but this particular fragrance was not coming from them. None of them was less knowledgeable than Mahavira. They were of the same spiritual stature, but they were not practitioners of that system of spiritual discipline which produces this fragrance, so their claims were rejected. Buddha was in no way inferior to Mahavira. He was of the same caliber and state of consciousness as Mahavira, but because he was not following the same method as Mahavira, his body could not emit the same fragrance. This fragrance had also emanates from Parshvanatha, a Tirthankara, who had died long before Mahavira's time. His contemporaries were still living, and they confirmed that Mahavira's fragrance was similar to Parshvanatha's. The ultimate result of a certain mantra processes was this particular fragrance. This was a memory-based arrangements for determining the authenticity of a Tirthankara. So, though Mahavira never claimed he was a Tirthankara, he was readily proclaimed to be a one. Makhali Ghoshal, on the other hand, did make the claim but could not prove it. You may wonder why fragrance was used as the criteria. The test had to be that deep and infallible. Words can be relied upon. The whole individuality of the person had to emit the special fragrance that would indicate that a certain flowering had happened within him, that the culmination of a mantra process which gives birth to a Tirthankara had happened. Makhali Ghusal, Ajit Kheskambal, and Sanjay Vilethiputra were all claimants very knowledgeable of equal caliber to Mahavira. Each of them had thousands of followers who claimed that their master was a Tirthankara, but they all disappeared into oblivion. On the other hand, Mahavira was absolutely silent on this point and never made any claim. But in the end, it was decided that only the person whose body emitted the particular fragrance could be a Tirthankara. Even mantra creates its own fragrance. Those who have practiced chanting Om have known a certain fragrance. Similarly, every mantra produces a particular type of inner light. How much light should be provided in a temple was decided on the basis of that inner light, neither more nor less. The ignorance of those who sit under dazzling electric lights in temples is simply amazing. It is not needed at certain it is not needed at all, because only as much light is needed as is within the inner sky, a very soft and inoffensive light. So a ghee lamp was used because it is not at all offensive and does not dazzle the eyes. It may not be easy to understand the difference between a kerosene light and the ghee light if you have never experimented with meditating on light. Light a lamp filled with kerosene oil and concentrate on the flame for 1 hour. Your eyes will start burning and will become tired and painful. Then light another lamp with ghee in it and concentrate on that flame for 1 hour. Your eyes will feel cooler and soothed. All these things were revealed by the inner experiences of thousands of people, and parallels were found that became external aids. Of course, it is not possible to provide a lamp exactly the same as the inner light, so only the most approximate was found. The exact fragrance which is produced within you after chanting a particular mantra cannot be found outside. So we have to be content with the nearest approximation. Sandalwood paste become popular in all the temples. The place on the forehead where the sandalwood paste is applied is called the Agya Chakra in yoga. Practicing certain mantras produces an inner experience of sandalwood perfume, but the source of that fragrance is the Agya Chakra. Whenever the third eye experience intensifies, a sandalwood perfume emanates. So, sandalwood perfumes has become symbolic of that experience. Hence, we apply sandalwood paste to the forehead. When the Agya Chakra emanates this fragrance, a sort of coolness is felt, as if you have put a piece of ice on third eye. There is a difference between cooling things and soothing things, just the same as there is between a kerosene oil lamp and a lamp filled with ghee. Ice is cooling, but it is not balmy or soothing. The cooling sensation of ice lasts only a short while and is followed by a feeling of heat. Ice is certainly cold, but not soothing or balmy. Eventually, the feeling is bound to be that of heat. You feel a little hotter than before, but sandalwood paste is balmy and not cold. It only soothes, soothes. The coolness has a kind of depth. If ice is put on the Agya Chakra, it will only make the surface cold. If sandalwood is applied to the Agya Chakra, you will feel that its soothing effect is seeping into deeper layers beyond the skin. The coolness has to penetrate to where the third eye is. Those who experienced the working of the Agya Chakra and felt its balmy effect looked for a parallel and found it in sandalwood paste. It has the same fragrance as that which emanates from within. All these external aids are just parallels, and when the temple has been provided with them, it becomes charged. So, there is a stipulation that no one should go to a temple without first taking a bath. Taking a cold bath breaks one's uh, mechan- mechanicalness and thought associations. Nobody was allowed to enter the temple without ringing the bell, and nobody was to go into the temple in old and dirty clothes. In fact, silk cloth had to be worn when visiting a temple because silk helps to generate body electricity and to protect it. So, silk cloths always remain new, however much you wear them. The temple became charged by all these precautions and arrangements, and so also anyone just passing by was affected by the magnetic field of the temple. It is said about Mahavira that within a certain radius around him, wherever he might be, it was impossible to commit any violence. It was his charged field within which no violence was possible. He was like a walking temple, and within that sphere, anything happening would suddenly be changed. It was a no sphere effect. Tilhard de Chardin has coined a new word, noosphere, in place of atmosphere. Atmosphere means the external climate. Noosphere means the mental or psychological climate, and within that field, certain types of happenings do not take place at all. In ancient days, forest ashrams were run by sages. The surrounding atmosphere of an ashram was considered pure, inviolable. If anything wrong happened among the disciples, the sage punished himself, not them, because it is meant that the field had lost its essential quality. So the disciples could not be blamed. To reprimand, to reprimand them was futile. Some untoward event only meant that the field had lost its sanctity, so the master himself would repent, undergo a fast, and purify himself. But Gandhi misunderstood this idea. Self purification was not meant to be a way to reprove anyone else, it was not intended to put pressure on another person. The idea was not to torture oneself or to go fasting unto death in order to change someone else's heart or conscience. Gandhi did not understand this. The sage was not purifying himself to change somebody else. He was doing it to recharge his field and the surrounding area. If this field is transformed, if the mental climate is transformed, the man living within it will also become transformed. There was no question of changing someone's conscience, but of changing the surrounding and the magnetic field around oneself. Every realized person utilizes this kind of a field of influence. People like Mahavira were like walking temples. Such people could not be expected to stay permanently in one particular place. So, something else more stable was needed that could become the center of life for the whole town. Something around which the lives of people would go on being transformed. We needed a place, a temple, where we could make our daily offerings and receive something in return. We may not even have been aware of what was happening. Everything happened by itself. Anyone passing the temple received something invaluable. There was a huge magnetic field created around it, and just as an iron filling attracted by a magnet is caught in its magnetic field, so anyone passing by the temple would be attracted and influenced by its energy. The field of a temple was like that. It is said about Moses that when he went to the mountain, he saw a divine fire burning there. A whole bush was burning, but in the middle of it there were flowers in full bloom and green leaves. Moses had set out in search for God. As he stepped towards the bush, suddenly he heard a voice coming from it, saying, "You foolish man, leave your shoes outside this place." There was no demarcation line, so Moses continued walking, looking for the threshold where he could leave his shoes. When he crossed a certain point where he felt a change, where he felt something within him change, an inner transformation, that was where he left his shoes. This was the threshold of the energy field. He entered it and prayed for forgiveness for desecrating this sacred place. A temple had a charged field around it that was very vibrant, and that field had a helpful influence on the entire village. This is not a fiction, results were actually achieved. The characteristic simplicity, innocence, and purity of Indian villages for thousands of years were more due to the charged field of the temples than to the villages themselves. However poor a village, the existence of a temple was an absolutely necessity. Without a temple, everything seemed chaotic without a rhythm. For thousands of years, villages maintained a sort of sacredness, and there were great invisible sources of that sacredness. The worst thing which could be done to destroy Eastern culture was to destroy this charged field of the temples. With the destruction of those vibrant temples, the entire Eastern culture crumbled. That is why people are skeptical about the value of temples today. Whoever has gone to school or college and has been taught only language and logic, only developing the intellect, the heart remaining closed, has never experienced a living temple and does not see any meaning in one. So, temples have slowly lost their significance. India cannot be India again until the temples again become alive. The whole alchemy of India lay in her temples. India received everything through her temples. There was a time when everything that happened in the life of a person revolved around the temple. If he was sick, he went to the temple. If he was unhappy, he ran to the temple. Even if he was happy, he ran to the temple to give thanks. If something good happened in the family, he went to the temple with fruit and flowers. If there was problems, he would go to the temple to pray. For him, the temple was all and everything. All his hopes, longings, and aspirations revolved around the temple. However poor he was, he kept the temple decorated with gold and silver and all sorts of jewels. Today, when people are dying of hunger, all that extravagance for the temples looks like madness. Remove the temples, build a hospital, or open a school. Let the temples be opened up for the homeless. Let them be used. Temples have become useless because we have forgotten their real use. We think, why should there be gold and silver and jewels lying in the temples when people are starving to death? But it is worth remembering that those same hungry people gave the gold and diamonds to the temples. Whatsoever they felt was most valuable to them, they gave to the temple. Because whatsoever they had known of great value in their life, they had learned from the temple. There was nothing that could sufficiently repay their debt, so they gave whatever they had, and there were good reasons to do so. Nothing continued for thousands of years without good reasons. The invincible fruit of temple's influence were continuously being received. There were clear and apparent benefits in being near a temple. Man always forgets. Whatever is sublime and valuable were forgot. Whatever is trivial and commonplace we remember continuously 24 hours a day. We have to make an effort to remember God, but our desires and passion do not need to be remembered. They are there all the time. Going downhill is easy, going uphill is always difficult. So the temple was built in the center of the village so that during the day one could go there as frequently as needed. It kept the search alive. Very few of us are naturally inspiring to seek. Most of us only feel inspired when we actually see things. When there were no airplanes, we did not have any desire to travel by plane. Yes, people like the Wright brothers did dream of flying. They invented the airplane, but the ordinary person will not have such dreams unless sees an airplane. So, when we could see godliness personified within the shape of a temple, something of godliness lingered on in our minds. This was especially so for people who could not visualize the unmanifest divine. For those who could, there was no need for a temple. But in a way, those people caused great harm to the temple because they said that the temples had no use and should be dispensed with. I myself used to say temples are useless, remove them. But slowly I began to realize that if the temples were destroyed, how would those who cannot visualize the unmanifest form of godliness ever be able to even think of godliness? From the angel from that angle, sometimes difficulties do not arise. If a person like Mahavira, who never needed a temple, speaks from his level of consciousness, he may want the temples removed. But if he thinks about your need, he will stop saying this. The temple remains a source of inspiration all 24 hours of your day. You remember that there is one more door in life other than your shop and or house, apart from your wife and your wealth. A dimension which is neither a part of your marketplace nor of your desires. It gives you neither wealth or fame, nor does it satisfy your desires. The temple is a constant reminder of that. There are monuments, there are moments in life when you are tired of the marketplace, bored with your family. These are the moments when you can find harmony in the temple. If the temple is destroyed, then there is no other alternative. If you are tired of the food at home, you can go to a hotel or restaurant. But if you are tired of the marketplace, where will you go? The temple provides a different dimension, away from the world of give and take. So those who made temples to be like the marketplace have destroyed them. A temple is not a place for bargaining, it is a place for rest and relaxation, where, tired and exhausted from all your worldly activities, you can find relief and peace. There are no conditions for entering a temple. You can only come if you have this much money, you can only come if you have this much knowledgeability, or you can only come if you have here this much prestige. A temple accepts you as you are. It is a place so simple that you are accepted as you are. You have become tired of the kind of life you are living many times. At such times, you may have felt the door to prayer opening. If this door has opened even once, it can open again and again, even in your shop and your home. Whenever you want to, at any time, this door will be easy for you to reach, because the moments that can be called truly great rarely come. It is not necessary to go on a pilgrimage or in search of a Mahavira or a Buddha. Such moments are too short lived. There should be some place just nearby which you can simply enter. Childhood memories are very important. Scientists say that by the age of 7, a child has learned almost all the fundamentals on which the superstructure of his knowledge will be built. Very little that is new will be added, but all his knowledge will be built on that base. If you are not able to form an association with the temple in the child's mind by the time he is 7, then it becomes difficult, even impossible to do so later. A lot of effort will be needed, and then too it will only be superficial. That is why we wanted the temple to be the child's first memory after birth. His surroundings were planned in such a way he would grow up near the temple, gradually coming to know it and absorbing it into his life. The temple would become an integral part of his being, and when he entered worldly life, the temple would have its own special place inside him, because it was the temple which would finally provide a retreat for which during the mature years of his life. So we wanted the temple to have a place in his mind right from birth. Later on, it would become difficult. All those who lived within the vicinity of the temple had an impression of its imprinted on their minds. It went so deep into their unconsciousness, it was no longer an idea but became a part of their being. So, all over the world, the forms and shapes of temples may have differed, but the temple itself was indispensable. In the world which is evolving now, the temple is not considered indispensable. Other things have taken its place, schools, hospitals, and libraries, but they relate only to the material. They have no connection at all with the beyond. Something else is needed that points to the transcendental. When we get up in the morning, we should be hearing temple bell ringing. And when we go to sleep at night, we should be hearing religious songs from the temple. There was an incident in Mahavira's life. A thief was lying on his deathbed, and his son asked him for a final word of advice that would help him in his work. The thief said, "Don't have anything to do with a person called Mahavira. If you know he is in your village, run to the next. If he is passing your way on the road, hide somewhere in a side street. And if, without realizing it, you are somewhere you can hear his words, immediately close your eyes and ears. Above all, beware of him." When the son asked him why he should be so afraid of Mahavira, His father told him not to argue. Just listen to what I say. If you go near that man, our business will be in danger and the family will starve. What happened next is very interesting. The thief's son always avoided Mahavira, but one day he made a mistake. Mahavira was sitting silently in a mango grove, and unknowingly, the thief's sons happened to pass that way. Suddenly, Mahavira started speaking. The thief heard half the sentence, closed his ears, and ran. But he had already heard half the sentence, and that landed him in a lot of trouble. He was being chased by the police. All the state police were after him for his thieving, and some weeks later, he was eventually caught. Thieving was his family, and he was an expert in his trade. He was so clever, he never left behind any incriminating evidence. It was well known he was a thief and had committed a lot of thefts. Everybody knew about it, but there was no evidence, so there was no alternative but to make him confess. He was made totally drunk and kept in such a state of intoxication he remained unconscious for 2 or 3 days. When he did open his eyes again, he was still in a state of semi consciousness. All around him, he saw beautiful women standing, and he asked where he was. He was told he had died, and that preparations were being made to take him to either heaven or hell. He was told people were waiting for him to become conscious so he could confess the sins he had committed. If he did, he would be taken to heaven, otherwise, he would be sent to hell. But if he spoke the truth, he would be saved. He now felt he should tell the truth and so not lose the chance of going to heaven. Now he had died. There was nothing to fear. But just at that moment, he remembered the half sentence he had heard Mahavira say. Mahavira had been talking about gods and ghosts. He had also mentioned the Yamadutas who take people to the worlds beyond death. The thief had heard him say, the toes of Yamduta are always inverted. Opening his eyes, he saw that the feet of the people standing by him were normal. So he became alert. He now saw there was no need to confess. He saw through the trick and told them he had not committed any sins. What could he confess? If they wanted, they could take him to hell, but as he had not committed any sins, how could they? So they had to let him go. Then he went running to Mahavira, fell at his feet, and asked him to complete the sentence, which had saved him. When half of Mahavira's sentence had saved him, of how much more benefit would be the whole sentence? He told Mahavira he was totally surrendered to him. Sometime or other, he was bound to be caught and hanged, but if he heard the rest of the sentence, he might still be saved. That is why Mahavira used to say that if even half the sentence of an awakened one is heard, it might be useful one day. Similarly, a man running past a temple or just casually passing by, hearing the sound vibrations coming from a temple or smelling the fragrance of the place, even that can be of help to him. So this is all about the topic called hidden mystery of Eastern temples. So I hope you love this topic, you enjoy this topic and gain some knowledge, some perspective out of it. So keep learning, keep enjoying, be meditative and be aware about what is happening in your surrounding, what is happening on the sacred places where you go and meditate, and try to keep your mechanism in a such a state that it are capable of receiving all types of energy, and try to go to places which emanate positive energy, vibrant energy, which are helpful in creating your mechanism a full-fledged machine. So I hope through this issue, through this topic, you learn a very subtle and important dimensions of life, meditation, temple, sacred places and various energies. So keep learning, keep enjoying, keep growing, be meditative, help people, and keep your mechanism in a subtle, in a innocent, in a vulnerable, so that it can receive all sorts of energy and enhance your life in a beautiful manner, and also help other people who are living in your surrounding or wherever you go. Make yourself a living temple, so that wherever you go it emanates certain types of energy which will benefit all other sorts of life form. So namaskaram, thank you.